Hello there, I'm Johanna McDowell. I'm the CEO of the Independent Agency Search and Selection Company, and I'm also the partner for Africa for Scopen. And I'm going to be talking to you about the role of digital in marketing these days. So my presentation has a number of slides in it, and what we're going to be doing is looking at the findings we had from Agency Scope in 2019-2020, which talked about the role of digital and how digital had grown in the marketing mix. And then I'm going to be showing you some more recent information from South America, from Latin America, where we conducted some research among marketers there to see what has changed during the COVID period of the last 6 months, because there have been some significant changes. So let's start off by telling you a little bit more about this, about Scopen. In 2019, we interviewed more than 250 marketers regarding how they choose agencies, how they work with agencies, the role of the various types of agencies in the marketing mix. And this is the breakdown of who we interviewed, and you can see there a number of the breakdown of the senior people who we interviewed, and how we've tracked this from 2017 to 2019. And what we aim for each time we do this research, which is every 2 years, we aim to increase the size of our number of respondents, and also the seniority and the fact that they are national. So on this slide, you can see all of the logos, not all, 85%, I think, of the logos of the companies who we interviewed. And as you can see there, all the big names are here. So we look at the top 100, top 300 marketers in the country, and then we aim to interview them. We make it as difficult for ourselves as possible so that we can make sure we have the best possible results. Again, here is the breakdown of who we interviewed in terms of seniority, in terms of categories, in terms of types of business that they were in, and you can see that quite clearly there. So we had a very good cross sample across the country and across all the different categories of business. So this question is, how much do you spend in marketing? So we ask marketers, what is your spend on marketing per year? And when we look at that afterwards, we then compare that to the size of the companies that they are representing. And we can then see what is the percentage of the turnover that they have, that they spend on marketing. As you can see from this slide, South Africa, actually, the percentage is relatively low. It's not the lowest, but it's certainly not the highest in comparison to other countries. And we're able to do this global comparison because Scopen operates in 12 countries, including South Africa. And you can see the other countries that we operate in. They're all very clearly marked there. So you can see what's happening in terms of percentage of income or expenditure on marketing per annum. We then track, where is this money being spent? And this is probably the most important slide in many ways, because you can see what is happening in terms of expenditure by category. So whether it's above line, whether it is below line, or whether it is digital. And you can see quite clearly here what South Africa is doing, how our expenditure is growing, and what is actually happening across the board, and in comparison to other countries. On the left of the screen, you can see how it's grown. What's really significant here, and I think this is significant particularly for direct marketing, is that below line stays very steady in terms of its growth, and digital is growing each time and at the expense of above line marketing. So you can see what the pattern is, and you can see how important digital is becoming. And the good news is that below line, which will include obviously a portion of direct marketing, has stayed very steady and continues to grow. So this particular slide talks about how marketers work with their agencies. Do they work with specialists? Do they work with What do they expect to have within an agency? And you can see the importance of digital and above-line expenditure. And you can see how this is changing over the years. What do we mean? What does a marketer mean when they want to have everything in one agency? So they expect as a minimum to see creative advertising and digital. So these days, if an agency doesn't have both of those attributes in its mix, it's not considered a fully integrated agency. And then you can see alongside that the other parts of the categories that are important. And what's interesting is that more and more clients would like to see media as part of their agency mix as well. And that's been quite a change in the last few years. But marketers certainly would prefer to have everything integrated if they can. And again, on that chart, you can see how the other disciplines fit in terms of complete integration. And then we're just looking here at this rather complex chart, but the characteristics of the ideal digital agency. And you can see what's important here is capabilities as well as creativity. And we see that increasingly in the marketplace. Marketers are looking for capabilities, skills, knowledge in the digital area, even more so, particularly in the last 6 months where things have accelerated. How many agencies do marketers have in general? And you can see here that on average, the average marketer among the 250 or so that we interviewed has about 4 agencies. This will include the advertising agency, the digital agency, any other specialist, and the media agency. And then you can see here how we then look at how do they work with their agencies. There's been quite a lot of movement in the last year or two regarding retainers versus projects, fixed fees versus project fees. And this slide shows you what is happening in each of the various categories of advertising. So whether it's above line, whether it's below line, whether it's digital, whether it's media. And you can see what is happening in terms of the percentage of how much money is fixed in terms of retainer and how much is on a project basis. What we are seeing generally is that marketers are preferring to work on a project basis, albeit on a continuous basis with the same agency. So they're not necessarily going for a fixed fee retainer, but they are going for working with an agency on a basic retainer basis and then adding in project fees as they go along. And then here's a comparison of South Africa to the rest of the world. And you can see we are more or less in line with what's happening in the other Scopen countries where we are present. And you can see that actually there's been an increase in the way of working that marketers have experienced. And here's another slide talking of similar things, but this time it's for digital. In terms of fees, what do people pay? How do marketers pay their agencies? This slide really gives you a breakdown of whether they're paying on a contract basis, whether they're paying a fixed fee retainer, and gives you some idea of the kind of rates that and costs and fees that they will be paying on an annual basis. And you can see there with the green how much is going into projects and how much is going elsewhere. So I think that's also interesting in terms of comparing what digital is doing in relation to the rest of the marketing mix. And here we are again looking at what is happening in South Africa and what is happening in the rest of the Scopen world. And we're on track. Then a very important question that we ask marketers is, what is the contribution by your agency to the growth of your business? And this is a very important question because we do want marketers to recognize the role that advertising and all forms of marketing plays within their companies. And it's an important question. The green is obviously where it's very important. Yellow is so-so, and red is not that important at all. So we need more green and more yellow here. And what we show you with this slide is how it works across the various types of advertising disciplines. Again, you can see significance in terms of what is happening with digital. So what this is telling us is that digital is becoming more and more important. And then if we have a look at this, you can see what's happening and how the growth has happened in that since 2017 to 2019, and then in comparison to the rest of the world. It's interesting to see always what's happening in other countries and to see how we're stacking up against them. And each country has unique characteristics that influence how they are using the various forms of advertising. So that was really to give you a snapshot of what is happening in terms of digital in South Africa, how it's grown in the last few years, what the impact is on the marketing mix, how marketers are behaving, and how they value digital, its importance, etc. This next few slides are going to give you an update on what has happened with the impact of COVID, and you're going to see some really quite dramatic shifts. This obviously relates, this is taken from our countries in Latin America, where we interviewed many marketers in those countries. We're in 5 countries in Latin America. We are going to be doing this study in South Africa this month. In fact, the survey is going to go out later today, and we will have results early in October, which I'll be presenting to the industry here in South Africa. But in the meantime, we wanted to give you this snapshot of what happened with COVID and the impact in Latin America. So this chart here shows you what our universe was that we interviewed, and the various types of businesses and industries that were interviewed, as well as the countries. So that gives you the overall picture. And then we asked the question, what had happened and what changed in terms of the significance of reduction in expenditure. Essentially, this study was really to find out what had happened and how had things changed. Where did the expenditure reduction, where was it impacted? Which media were impacted? Which types of advertising were impacted? And what were the key main areas that came out of this? So you can see that there was a 39% reduction in overall ad spend, which is massive. And there were obviously particular areas that were impacted more than others. And that's really what we want to demonstrate with this piece today. Because what's significant is that although there were lots of reductions across the board and lots of changes, the area that was least impacted was in fact digital. So those media that out of home, radio, TV, all of them actually suffered huge losses in terms of expenditure, but digital managed to remain fairly robust. Still was a slight reduction, but far less than all of the other categories. And then, of course, we also had to find out, having found out what's happened in the last few months, what's important to also know is how do these marketers see the recovery happening and when do they see it happening? So I'll tell you a little bit more about this once we've had a look at this chart. And this chart really illustrates for you what happened in terms of the reductions in all the other categories apart from digital. And I don't know for certain, and we haven't done the study yet here in South Africa, but I'm pretty sure that our results next month will be very similar to what's happened in Latin America. So recovery. This is what the marketers in Latin America see in terms of how many months it will take to recover successfully from what has happened with COVID. And remember that they are actually, those countries, some of them have been far worse hit than South Africa. They also have some struggling economies. They have economies that are emerging, very similar to ours here. So I think this will give us a good idea of how we can expect our recovery to be over the course of the next 6 months to 12 months.